to the astrology interview. I'm Sue Brain, and I'm joined today by Maddie King. Now, Maddie King is a natural healthcare and energy medicine specialist. And I really wanted to talk to her because about the elements. I mean, the elements in an astrological chart form the basis of understanding how somebody performs in their life or how they are in their life. And Maddie is a specialist in understanding that in the 5 elements. So, Maddie, how would you like to start to introduce your understanding of the elements?
Well, first of all, Sue, thank you for inviting me on today. I love talking about the 5 elements because I don't quite know how I would live my life, look after myself, my family, my friends, without that basic knowledge of the 5 elements, which I can go into. I mean, if we have an understanding of these 5 elements, it helps us look after ourselves. It helps us nurture any relationship we have. And it's fun. And another reason why I love the 5 elements is it was formed after centuries of observation. You know, it's more of a sort of almost a philosophy on life, if you want, than set rules. You know, there's that wonderful ebb and flow within each element.
So let's just start with your own elements, Maddie. How are your elements made up?
Okay, so the 5 element theory is we each have the 5 elements within us and we can access them. Okay, so let's look at the 5 elements. It starts off with water, which flows into earth, which flows into wood rather, which goes into fire, which goes into earth, which goes into metal. And it's a continuous cycle. It's often called the seasons. It follows the seasons. It's yin yang. It's just that amazing cycle of energy that each element has a specific character, if you want. It influences specific organs of your body. So, for example, I am predominantly a metal element. Now, whilst I have all 5 in me, okay, one will be my primary. So I often think of these 5 elements stacked up in front of you. One's going to be closest to you, and that's your primary. That's the one that's going to influence you most. That's going to be your strength, and it will also can be your weakness. It's where your life lessons are. And then you might have a secondary, which is coming up and quite close. So you may be a mixture of those, but you also have the other 5 stacked up behind you, and you can pull on those any time at all. So a very good example might be, for example, if you had a metal element who can be quite quiet. I'm a metal element. You might not believe that. I can be quite quiet. But if I'm teaching or if I'm on stage lecturing, what am I going to pull on? I'm going to pull on every single one of those elements to connect to the elements in the audience. But I'm going to pull a lot on fire, my fire element.
Yes.
So you go up higher, Maddie, and it makes that connection. It builds that connection. So we have the ability to play with the attributes, if you want, and the strengths of every single element. It's at our disposal. But your primary, that's your guideline in life. So as a metal element, metal governs lung and large intestine. So they can be a real strength, but they can also turn to be a weakness.
Yeah.
And each element governs specific meridian energies and organs and emotions. So
I think it's really interesting because you're coming from it from a different aspect than I am as an astrologer. So with astrology, we work with just 4 elements, which we work with fire, which is spring, earth, which is summer, air, which is autumn, and the water, which is winter. And as you say, they kind of flow into each other. But I'm really interested in when that element is out of sync, like there's very low sort of energy in that element, or you've got all the planets in a particular element, and bingo, off you go, and it's very difficult to find a balance. And I just wanted to talk a little bit more about that.
Getting the balance. Okay, so
Yes.
if you I'll use myself because I love talking about myself. Metal element. I know that my strength is going to be my lungs and large intestine, but it could easily slip to being my weakness. I know that my strengths, emotionally being primarily a metal, are everything is very sacred. We process things, we take our time, we are not particularly social animals. So I might begin to look at myself. This is when you understand the elements, it's useful for
Yeah.
self care, and think, am I becoming a bit too much of a hermit? It's not just about,
Mm.
is my breathing labored, or am I constipated or something? It's not just
Yes.
physical, it's that emotional thing. Um, and if you understand, you can keep an eye, because in the minute an attribute of an element ceases to be constructive and begins to be destructive to you, however small,
Yeah.
that's the time when you can get into balance. So as a lung and large intestine person, okay, what I might do is, if you don't know the meridian energies, you could just use a YouTube video of Donna Eden or myself
I'll put
tracing the
I'll put the
meridians.
link below. Yeah.
Lovely. Or
Yeah.
just pull up any diagram. So I might think, do you know, I am getting really, I don't want to speak to anyone, I don't want to see anyone. I'm so happy by myself and I'm processing things, and but it's going, that processing is going a bit into procrastination. So I would start just simply lots of things you can do. This is the
Yeah.
basic go-to, tracing that meridian to bring it back into balance.
Okay, so Maddie, for anybody who's just uses astrology, water is basically, it's the dreamer, it's the emotional body. We have air, that's the researcher of ideas that wants to communicate, and earth is the manifester of ideas, and fire is our enthusiasm and faith. So we don't do metal elements, but I think all of it is it just all of it beautifully ties in together, doesn't it? So
Yes, it doesn't reflect exactly, but if you know the two systems, it just gives you another layer, another
yes,
nuance, and more depth to your understanding of
absolutely, yeah.
yourself and others,
So let's talk about, if we could just stay with, at the moment, the four elements for the astrology anyway, the water, air, fire, and earth. I mean, if we have, let's say, very low water, so this is an issue with how we emotionally feel. What would you say to people about that? Or how would you give them some form of resilience to address that imbalance in their life?
So if you take water, water in five elements is the philosopher. It is someone being a deep thinker, you know. And if that was out of balance, if water was not in balance, either it can be over and you have too much, or you can have too little. And
Yes,
they both bring about a different type of imbalance. But to get back into that wonderful balance, which is never permanent, we're always dancing with balance. Again, I would work the energies of the body. So I might trace the meridian. Tracing meridian is really easy. Rub your hands together, shake them off, and then you just trace the pathway. That's all you have to do. Um, the other the other thing which I will do when I'm tracing is I will talk to the energies. Okay. So
mm,
we know, science has proved that the cells in our body listen, they hear us, they respond to our 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 spoken statement and our thoughts as well. And energy does instantaneously. So if, for example, I was tracing a meridian, I might say, if it was kidney, my kidney energy, my
water energy.
bladder, or my water
Mm.
energy is strong and robust and resilient. It is so good at the moment. It's perfect. talk to yourself in words that you understand in
Yeah.
your mother tongue. Talk to the energies.
I think it's really interesting the kind of the downside of the water energy, if it's very low. It can kind of make you feel reclusive and scared and phobic. But the upside of it, the other side of that is creative genius, because you're so in tune with the collective, with that sense of almost receiving messages from the collective and expressing that consciously.
Mhm, mhm.
I find that really interesting. And kidney energy is about fear, isn't it?
It is about fear, and it's people often think, oh, someone's very fearful. Their kidney energy must be out. Their water element must be out. Yes, it can be if you're overly fearful. It's one reason why, as we age, our kidney essence decreases and up comes fearfulness. So you can find yourself in your 80s thinking, why am I fearful? What am I anxious and fearful about that? I never was when I was 20.
Isn't
But the other thing which sometimes catches people out is you can have the daredevils, those people who parachute jump for fun and do all these amazing things, but very dangerous and no fear. I have no fear. That's also a water balance a water element
it?
out
Yes.
of
Oh, yes,
balance.
because they're testing themselves.
Yeah, so it can
Yes.
go either way, and that is the
Yeah.
fun of it with astrology and the 5 element
Yeah.
model of it's never simple.
Interesting.
It's going underneath and finding that little nuance.
Yeah, so it's about finding a boundary that works, because water is boundaryless, isn't it? It's about finding a boundaries and addressing hypersensitivity, because that can be an imbalance as well. And it's sort of, and I think when you're very hypersensitive, one of the best things you could do is get into your body and feel it, and perhaps test yourself on some level, not necessarily chucking you out of a plane, yourself out of a plane, but just understanding that those levels and being very watchful about fear. Okay, let's move on to air. So so air for me are the communicators, the researchers. They're in their heads. They've got 100 of new ideas all at once. Don't necessarily want to do things for too long, but are so curious, always asking questions. How
Mm.
would you say to them about finding a balance when when there's too little planets in air or too many?
Well, I think with air, it's really good. Well, with all of them, we need to be grounded, and when someone is up in their heads all the time, it's a fabulous place to be. And I'm not saying to let go of that inspiration and connection, but be aware there also has to be a balancing connection through your feet into Mother Earth. And you're just a conduit then. You have this wonderful energy coming up, the inspiration coming down, and you get the real yin yang balance then,
Yeah,
rather than it all being up here. And it's a much fuller experience. So I think everyone needs to look at their grounding. Because we don't ground very much. We're meant to walk on the
yeah,
earth.
yes,
The polarities are meant to match. It feeds us, we feed it, and our shoes take us away. There's rubber plastic
yeah,
trainers, whatever they're made of. Our
yeah.
cars. We live in high rise buildings. When I would say to anyone watching this, when was the last time your bare feet touched the ground? And even if you went out into the park, or if you're lucky enough to have a garden or a beach near you, get grounded, because
Yeah.
you'll be even more inspired then. There'll be more
Absolutely.
energy moving. It's got to
Yeah.
move.
I mean, the upside of air is fantastic at relationships and communication and writers, researchers, all of those wonderful airy things living in your head. But the downside of that, you can be very fickle and disjointed. That you can't concentrate, or you're just moving off all the time onto a new thing, and leaving people going, what? Or you can't stop talking. That's the other thing about air. Okie doke. Is there anything else you want to say about air?
No, no,
Okay.
no,
Let's
no.
move on to earth. lovely Taurus, Virgos, and Capricorns for the astrology. These, I call them manifestors. They have the ability to put their feet on the ground, and they
Yes.
have that ability to be a manifester. So how would you describe them if they've got too much earth or too little earth?
Well, I'm going to revert a little bit to my 5 elements because I love the earth element. It sits at the moment in the 5 elements, but in the old Celtic traditions, the real ancient element, it sat in the middle. It is the season of transition. It is that mothering of moving into each season. And if you want someone to look after you, that's fantastic. Earth elements are fabulous at that. But when it goes out of balance, they can be very needy. They can be very demanding, very manipulative, you know.
Yes.
So, and also earth element for us as well, I'm not sure if it's the same in astrology, is about self-care.
Mm,
It's the martyr syndrome. My mum was an earth, and she used
yes.
to go, "No, no, no, you do that, darling. Don't you worry about leaving me at home alone. I'll be alone, but don't you worry about
That's
that."
Virgo. That can be Virgo. I'll put it that
He
way.
was a Virgo as well.
I
Okay, so
watched.
she earthy Virgo, and uh, you know, but they are amazing. But it's when that it's the self care. So I would encourage anyone who feels their earth element, whether it's astrological or 5 elements, is out to really look to self care, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
changing the habit of putting other people first. Okay, as they say on
yes,
the aeroplane, put your oxygen mask on before you help
yes,
others. it, we're brought up in a society that it's very selfish to think of yourself first. Try and deprogram yourself from that, and not be
yes,
cruel or unkind, but keep yourself healthy in mind and body and spirit,
yeah,
and then you are much stronger. You're much more of a beacon, if you want, for
yeah.
healing for other people.
Well, yeah, I think earth signs can be quite negative because it's earth energy, but it's interesting, sort of like the downside of them, because they could get really stuck in their point of view, in their opinions, in all the planning. Earth people in astrology love to plan, and they're always planning for the future. So that's very hard for earthy people to actually live in the present. But the upside is they're brilliant business people. They can work with people. They can consider. They can build things.
Mhm.
So there's a lot going on, but it's how to get, as I said, how to get that balance right.
I get that. And also, if you look at relationships, if you have an earth partner and you're a water, what do earth and water make? Things can get very muddy, very
Maddie.
sticky. So,
Yes. Ye-
it has all sorts of exciting implications.
Yes. Yes. And fire and air, that makes steam.
Yeah,
No, fire and water makes steam, but
I want
fire
to.
and air, you're living up here. It's really hard to
Mm,
put your feet
mm,
on the
mm,
ground if you've got a lot of fire, just fire and air.
Yes, I
I think
mean,
if
go
you've
on.
got, a lot of fire and air, or you've got, let's say, fire, and then you've got water, but nothing in between, then it can be very difficult for you to manage your moods because you're
It
all
can
either
be.
up here or down, down in the depths.
And it's very interesting in the 5 element model. You have an element which feeds you, you have an element that you feed, and you also have an element that controls you. So a very good example is in 5 elements is fire and metal. So if you have a metal element, like I have Donna Eden is a fire, and I'm a metal, and I give her some structure, the chalice, and she
Mm,
melts my metal. So I'm not quite so rigid in my attitudes or anything like that. So I think it's really exciting to look at the impact that all the different relationships in your life have in an elemental sense, because if you understand that, you have that knowledge to improve and get the best out of that relationship.
Okay, well, let's go to fire, the last
Yeah.
element for us in astrology anyway. So fire for me is the inspirer. It's
Yes.
the ideas person, isn't it? It's that, oh my God, I'm so enthusiastic about life. I can't bear it. It's
But
going out there.
sometimes you know, in Five Elements, it's very similar. They are so inspiring. When you see Donna Eden on stage, you are captivated. You may not even understand what she's saying, you know, but you're just captivated by the energy of fire, which can warm you, it can expand you, but it can also burn you when it goes out of control, you know. So with fires, I think the in Five Element, it's they can get too manic. You know, they can actually get quite anxious about things. They're very much in the moment, the fires in our system.
Yes.
And I know that if a buyer says something to you, they really mean it at the time. Okay. But half an hour later, they're off doing something else. You know, they're so active, they're so energizing. Great to be around, but exhausting sometimes as
Well,
well.
it's party, isn't it, really? It's all let's
Yes, it is.
go and have a good time doing this, that, and the other. Yes. And
Yeah.
this sense of inspiring. So if
If
you
you're lacking that, if you're lacking a bit of joy in life, to activate your fire, and a simple way of doing that, if you're lacking a bit of joy, is, and I know some of you may raise your eyes to the ceiling when I say this, but just laugh and smile.
that's
God,
tough if you
you know,
haven't got fire.
yeah, it's really, really hard, and it will feel really false. But
Yes.
it releases. If you do it long enough, it releases. I've done it with classes. I'm not a laughter therapist, but I've done it with one
Yeah.
particular class I remember. And there was a student in there, and I said, just keep going, even though you feel stupid, it's silly what she do, just keep going. And suddenly the energy changed, and
Wow.
everyone was really laughing then. It did take a while, I have to say, a few minutes, but laughter is a relief. And you just say in your mind, or whatever, it doesn't matter, you know,
Yeah.
and try and reconnect to that fire, which our modern day life can really dampen down.
And I
You know?
think another thing for fire, because it's really when you've got low fire, it's really hard to get motivated. If you
Oh,
haven't got that inspiration, how do you get off the sofa? So it is about finding a form of discipline which you can get into your body and maybe do some exercise or yoga or tai chi or walk or get a dog or anything that gets you off the sofa and into your body that you can feel inspired to go and do something.
yes, and that inspiration thing is very hard to get. It's easy for us to talk about sometimes, but very, very hard to do. So it has to be something that attracts you. And
Yes.
one of the things I would suggest, I think walking is the best medicine ever, even if it's just a stroll round the block. I can remember once reading some Harvard professor said, if you could put all the benefits of a brisk 20-minute daily walk in a pill, it would cure everything: depression, lethargy, tiredness, joint pain, back pain, all of this. So, what I find is my advice would be find a walking buddy, meet up with someone to walk
Somebody who's
your dog.
not got low fire, but
Yeah.
she's
Yeah,
got
no, don't want two little fires together, because sometimes just
some.
the fact you've got to get it, you've arranged to meet someone, you'll get off the sofa and you'll do it.
Yeah.
It is very hard to do, but look at what would motivate you, you know,
Yes.
and it could be something very small to start with. Maybe it's baby steps, you know, like, well, I'll park my car a little bit further away from the supermarket
Yes.
and I'll walk that
Yes.
extra 50 yards or something, you know, but walk it and smile as you do it and talk to your body. And I know no one's going to know. No one's going to know. You can do it in your head and say, do you know, I feel great today. Happiness is a choice and I choose to feel happy. I choose to feel good. And it feels false, but
Yeah.
don't forget your body's listening to you, you know.
And I
Let's
think
start with baby steps.
yeah, the other thing about if you've got too much fire, you in astrology, you tend to be a show off. And it's
Yes.
actually about, which is fine, you know, you're showing up, but you can be showing off, and that can be quite grating on people. So it's about learning to manage that over fire, that too much fire. And again, physical exercise is really good. Go for a pounding walk, or you know, go down that boring old swimming thingy, or get in a river, or do something and get into water, you know, cool it down into
Yes.
steam.
But also, as I say, you could get involved in fires like company, you know, so you could get involved in some sort of sport that
Yes.
is group sport, you know,
Yeah.
so you've got to turn up.
Yeah.
They're
Yes.
relying on you. Then once you get in, someone in that group is going to have a great fire energy, and by osmosis, you'll pick that
Yes.
up. Um, it's funny, all these little tricks, and you know, it's very rare that someone changes in a split second. The energy can change in a split
Yeah.
second.
But it takes a time, doesn't it,
But
to
it
get to know
does take
yourself?
time, and it's being kind to yourself and thinking, okay, I've got, you know, in just going through the elements, we've got wood, and there's anger. It was two types of anger. There's outwardly gallbladder anger, outwardly directed, or inwardly directed anger, which is
Mm,
liver energy. So it's forgiving yourself, you
yes.
know, not being angry with everything. I know, and listen to the signs your body has. They'll be unique to you. So, for example, I know when my gallbladder energy is out because I'll swear. I don't swear normally, but I'll drop something and I'll go, "Oh, fiddly sticks." Well, more
Yeah.
than that. And I go, but I've learnt over the years to think that was unwarranted annoyance, irritation, anger. You
Yes.
dropped a pencil. What's the deal, Maddie? And
Yeah.
so I automatically now look, that's a clue. My gallbladder
Yeah.
needs attention.
Yeah.
You know, and you begin to see the traits in your
Yes, it's
behavior.
about listening, isn't it? It's about
Listening.
being aware of what's going on around you,
Mm.
how your relationships are. Are you sending people crazy? If you are, check your chart out, and you might need to buy a book on how to work out your fire, your elements. But it's so worth doing, because that's the basis of who you are. Maddie, we're coming to the end. Is there anything else that you would like to say, which can help people to understand how better to balance their elements?
I would say if I've tickled your fancy about the 5 elements, which is not exactly the same, they're different, but they're fabulous to work with astrology. Do your research. There are some fabulous books out there. On my blog, I've got a reading list of my favorite 5 element books. Just buy one, don't buy them all, okay? And just ease yourself into it. If you're attracted to it, it will change your life.
Yeah.
And you can marry it together with astrology, and it just takes you to a deeper level of understanding of yourself and those around you and how you relate. But I hope that even just one of you gets involved with the 5 elements and marries it with astrology. I'll be happy, because it has, as I started off saying, Sue, I
Mm.
don't know quite how I'd live my life if I didn't have that knowledge, and I'm still learning, of the 5 element model.
Well, thank you. I loved that, because I've learnt loads, and I'm certainly going to check out the 5 elements.